What is going on, everybody? I hope you're having a great day today. This is Alex from the Fresh Fantasy Podcast, and this is the 7th episode of Season 4. Today, we are talking about the biggest sleepers in fantasy football. Right now, of course, we all know the draft is coming in just a couple weeks. It is not too far away, and ADPs are going to change. Rookies get drafted to different teams, but right now, there's people that, regardless of what happens and who gets drafted to their teams, are just not getting enough love in the fantasy football space right now. And there's some guys that we need to be talking about today that you should be rising up your draft boards, whether you're doing early drafts or just people to keep an eye on in general. And joining me today to break this all down is a man who is widely regarded as one of the funniest people in the fantasy football industry. He has worked for some of the biggest fantasy football companies on the planet, leading to working for arguably the leader in fantasy sports. He is also a former finalist for DFS Writer of the Year with over 35,000 followers. He is the man, the myth, the FantasyPros, Derek Brown. Welcome back to Season 4.
Alex, far too kind. The puff and praise. I mean, I'll take it, man, because, it's not always that's not usually what you hear around Twitter streets when I throw out takes on the old social media. More of it's, what the hell? Do you even watch football, bro? But good to be back, man. It's always a fun time talking with you. And I think the funny thing, I don't want to sit here and give too much of this show away, but you sent me over the outline for this show, and I was like, damn it, Alex, you're taking a lot of the guys I like. So I think it's going to be a good show, man.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that. It is good to hear, but that's how it is on Twitter. I mean, the more you work full time at Fantasy Pros, the more people are going to want the job. They're going to have to come at your neck and make sure that you are up to date. But again, they're like you said, there's guys on your list that were my runners up for who I would have picked as my players in this list. But nonetheless, today we are going to start at the quarterback position. We are going to go work our way down to running back, wide receiver, and tight end, and each give our number one target at each position. And at the end of the show, Derek and I will each give our number one player, regardless of position. That is our biggest sleeper in fantasy football that you can't get enough love. And we will finish out with his 2023 flag plant. You do not want to miss it. But with that being said, let's start at the quarterback position. Derek, you are the guest today, so we're going to start with you. Who is your number one quarterback sleeper for this year in fantasy football?
Dude, I would have never, if somebody would have put this in front of me and said, in the year 2023, you're going to stand this quarterback, I would have never picked this name out of a hat, honestly. But here's the thing. You have to stay liquid and you got to sit here and adjust. And the more and more I dug into this team, what their outlook is for 2023, the more I cannot get away from, and rest my soul, Daniel Jones. I absolutely love him for this year. I mean, first of all, we know that the Konami code is absolutely present. He was top 5 in basically every rushing metric for quarterbacks you look at for last year. Really, if that kind of stays, and even if you bump him down from like 700 to 600 rushing yards, 6 to 5, somewhere around there, and the passing ceiling goes up, because I know that they haven't added a ton of like truly sexy names. Like they brought back Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins is back. They signed a litany of slot wide receivers, which everybody loves to clown on social media. Although that really just comes down to they do not have to rush Wan'Dale Robinson back, and they would get competent slot receiver play until he's ready. And they added Darren Waller. Like, regardless of whatever you want to say about Waller, again, I love Waller this year because people are sleeping on him. But Daniel Jones, I think, has top 5 quarterback upside. And people could say that is insane, and that's fine. Say what you will. But if you look at weeks 11 through 18 last year, he was QB5 in fantasy points per game. So if you want to sit here and poo-poo the fact that I'm saying he has top 5 upside, he already showed it to us over almost a half of a season. So what are you talking about? So I think that he is being slept on because he's being drafted in multiple formats outside the top 12 quarterbacks. He's going as a QB2 in some spots. And not only does this come down to Daniel Jones rushing offensive upside, you look at, again, going back to weeks 11 through the rest of the season, so the playoffs, this is an offense that was changing its identity once it got just decent wide receiver play. You look at weeks 1 through 10, 22nd in neutral pace, 30th in neutral passing rate. They were basically like, we're going to go slow. We're going to run the ball. We don't give a shit. We're playing keep away because we don't have anything that we trust right now. What happened after week 11? They jumped up to 12th in neutral pace and 14th in neutral passing rate. This team was 13th in EPA per play and 11th in play success rate. So we're talking about they already showed us over a half of a season where Daniel Jones was a top 5 fantasy quarterback on a weekly basis. This was a top 12 pace offense and in multiple spots, a top 12 efficiency offense. Now you're telling me they basically brought everybody back and added Darren Waller, and they're possibly going to add a first-round wide receiver, and you're telling me Daniel Jones does not have that type of ceiling? I will adamantly disagree with anybody that says that.
Yeah, I think the other thing that people should be thinking about when you talked about that split from weeks 11 on, like their bye week was in week 9. They got back from the bye week in week 10, and that's where everything started to shift. And that is one of the other things with Daniel Jones. You see that after the bye week, how did this team change what their offensive philosophy was? And clearly they made more of an emphasis to trust Daniel Jones after the bye week, which led to the big weeks coming. And also, like you said, Darren Waller, Wan'Dale Robinson, their offense should only have better weapons this year. Daniel Jones is still just 25 years old, and he should only be better overall. But for me, I have an older quarterback that, to me, like, is just getting hate.
Here, Alex.
Rightfully so. Oh, you are wonderful. But for me, it's got to be Russell Wilson. I mean, Russell Wilson is the quarterback 17 right now in FantasyPros ECR, and his worst finish in his 11 seasons in the NFL is the QB 16. So he's going lower than he's ever finished in his entire career. And, after Nathaniel Hackett was gone and really done with on this Broncos team, Russell Wilson was a top 3 QB in points per game over the last 5 weeks of the season. And his weapons in Javonte Williams, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, Greg Dulcich are all getting better. I mean, we don't have any, 30-year-old players in this team that's going to go down. He played last season and finishes the QB 16, where Latavius Murray more than doubled any other player on their entire team in rushing yards. So their run game should be better. All of their offensive weapons should be better. They bring in Sean Payton, which should be an upgrade for Russell Wilson as a quarterback, and he's going lower than his worst finish of his entire career. So, I mean, D-Bro, do you think I'm missing something here with Russell Wilson, or are people just hating on the man a little bit too much?
Alex, this is one of the names where I was pissed off when I saw the sheet, and I was like, damn it! I'm big into Russell Wilson, too, this year, and honestly, from these two different quarterback takes, I'm kind of scared for myself, man. I'm scared for both of us. Like, the fact that I'm this much into dimes and I am into Russ, but this comes down to exactly what you illuminated. And that's where my process has taken me to, as far as with Russell Wilson as well, is the season, like basically the finishes we saw after Hackett was out of the building. The other part about this is I almost put Cortland Sutton on this sleeper list, because the discrepancy between his ADP and Jerry Jeudy's ADP is absolutely ridiculous. And people could talk about, okay, well, production and things of that nature. If you look at deeper metrics and just going by what could the wide receiver control, he can't throw himself the damn ball, so ixnay on that. But what he can control is getting open on his routes. You look at ESPN's open scores, I don't think anybody would just tell you without staring at this that both Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton, amongst a sample of 82 qualifying wide receivers, both finished top 12 in this metric. So they were getting open at a top 12 rate. Russell Wilson was playing bad. The scheme was bad. So these are still immensely talented wide receivers that he has surrounded by him. Sean Payton has come out and said, like, no. All these rumors about people like, we're going to trade one of these guys, that is bullshit. We want to add talent. So I think that, yes, the Denver offense, we could have been a year early. And the thing that makes me love it is he makes this list because of how bad they got burned last year. All of the recency bias. Like, yeah, you got to pay up for Jerry Jeudy. You're not paying anything for Cortland Sutton or Greg Dulcich, which, foreshadowing, we might be talking about later. But this is an offense people need to be buying into, and that starts with Russell Wilson. I love this call.
Yeah, and what about sticking with their team? And we're talking about just their passing game. And let's go to running backs. I mean, do you think there's any running back in particular between, Javonte Williams or Samaje Perine, or even both of these guys that you think should be a sleeper and someone that people should be paying a little bit more attention to?
I'm right now years old that I just put it together that how much Broncos love we are going to give in this show. And I think it's beautiful, to be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
you talked about Russell Wilson. I got to talk about Samaje Perine. I screamed from the high heavens last year in the primer every single week. I was like, Joe Mixon is playing terribly. You can craft an easy case that Samaje Perine outplayed his ass the entire freaking year. You look at Samaje Perine, 24th in yards after contact per attempt, 30th in PFF's elusive rating. The times where he has gotten a starter's workload, so the last 4 games over the last 2 years where he's played at least 60% of the snaps, this guy has averaged 19 and a half touches, 103.6 total yards. He's been the RB3, RB10, RB18, and RB2 on weekly scoring. And now you can get him as an RB4 in most different drafts. I think he should be priced as an RB3. Like, he should be in that elite handcuff tier that also offers you standalone value, because Javonte Williams' health is up in the air. We're getting reports, and we have for the entire offseason, that we don't know if he's going to play. He might start on the pup. He might miss half the season. And right now, Samaje Perine is walking into, he could be the lead back, and what we're talking about is a big bounce back offense. I think that they still add a back in the draft, but I don't think it's going to be somebody they're throwing a lot of capital behind. So, like, you're talking about 3rd round, 4th round, maybe 5th round capital, probably somebody that can catch passes to complement just looking at how Sean Payton has run his backfields. Like, I think that Deuce Vaughn is a possibility, but he's not going to go high. I think Kenny McIntosh is a possibility. He's not going to go high. So you're talking about Samaje Perine at worst is a 1B in this offense. At best, he's the 1A, or maybe the damn workhorse. People need to be buying into him, man.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about Samaje Perine right now, where he's going in drafts is the equivalent of just him being the handcuff for Javonte Williams, and
A
like
low
being
end
like
handcuff.
like a low end handcuff where regardless, he's probably one of the best handcuffs in all of fantasy football right now. Right. And there's a chance that we also get him at his price right now, and we get a starting running back. Even if it's for the first 2 weeks of the season, he's a running back 1 in those 2 weeks. You know, he's probably going to see 20 plus touches.
He's an RB3 the rest of the year, and then he's a handcuff.
Exactly.
Like, you're talking about a guy you're drafting that could be in your starting lineup for multiple freaking weeks, maybe the whole damn season. And at worst, he's a middle flex play. Like, how is that not just money in the bank as soon as you draft him?
Completely agree. I absolutely love Samaje Perine. But another guy that I also love is Kenneth Gainwell. I mean, for the Eagles. And again, we've talked about on the Fresh Fantasy podcast before, I love me some Rashad Penny this year. But don't forget right now that the only other running backs under contract besides Gainwell for the Eagles are Penny, Boston Scott, and Trey Sermon. And none of them have ever exceeded 125 touches in an NFL season, which is about 7 touches per game. And Kenneth Gainwell, albeit on a smaller sample size last year, was 5th in fantasy points per opportunity. He was 8th in fantasy points expected per touch. But Pat Fitzmaurice of FantasyPros actually pointed this out, that his 2 biggest snap shares of the entire season last year came in the NFC Championship and the Super Bowl. He averaged 14 touches per game in the playoffs for the Eagles last year. And again, when you have these other running backs on their team right now that have never seen a big workload, that means that, you know, Kenneth Gainwell could be the guy to take that if Rashad Penny can't stay healthy. They've never given the work to Boston Scott before. Same thing with Trey Sermon. So Kenneth Gainwell outside of Penny is probably the next guy to do it. And again, could they draft, you know, a running back in the 1st or 2nd round? Yes. But I think this team, with some of the guys that have left on defense, they have a little bit more pressing needs than who's going to be working for them at running back at this point. They didn't want to pay Miles Sanders. I think they're just going to stick with the guys that they have at this point. But point being, when you get Kenneth Gainwell in the running back 40 range, same thing with Samaje Perine, he has legitimate starter upside on this team, and you can get it for a ridiculous cheap price right now, and you just cannot get enough of that. Let's move on to my favorite position, at least. I don't know about you, D, bro, but the wide receiver position. When you talk about underrated wide receivers, we'll start with you. Is there anyone in particular at the wide receiver position specifically that you just cannot get enough of that needs to be moving up draft boards?
I'm going to go with an old man with this one. And I don't think that he's getting enough love. And a lot of this is just because this player has never gotten enough love. He's put up 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season after 1,000-yard season in multiple spots, every different quarterback. good offenses, terrible offenses. We've just seen this guy produce, and it finally fell off last year because of he was used extremely poorly by Pep Hamilton. Brandon Cooks needs to be drafted. He needs to be a wide receiver 3 on your boards. He's going to go as a mid to low end wide receiver 4 in multiple different formats, multiple spots, because people are like, hell, he's kind of older. Oh, well, he's coming off not a great season. Oh, it's McCarthy and the Cowboys and the stink, and we don't like Dak. Brandon Cooks needs to be drafted. If you look at his season last year, Alex, was a tale of 2 seasons. Weeks 1 through 7, Pep Hamilton was using him in this low A-dot yak role, and it was garbage. His A-dot was 8.6, which out of the qualifying wide receivers in that spot, he was 31st out of 42 wide receivers. His yards per route run was 33rd out of 42 wide receivers. His PFF receiving grade was 40th out of 42. Bad stuff all around. Then you saw Pep Hamilton finally wake up and say, oh, shit, like, this is bad. What we're doing is bad. We need to change this now. And him and Nico Collins had flipped roles. Beginning of the year, Nico was playing the field stretcher. Brandon Cooks was the underneath guy. Then you saw their roles flip where Brandon Cooks went back to stretching the field. And after week 8, you saw all of his numbers pop back up. He was 20th out of 57 wide receivers in PFF receiving grade. He was 22nd in yards per route run, 7th in A-dot. And if you look at also his full season metrics, 27th in route win rate, 20th in win rate against man coverage. This all speaks that Brandon Cooks is not washed. He is in a better situation. He is going to be the number 2 target in this Dallas Cowboys passing offense. And whether you like Mike McCarthy or not, they are still going to throw a ton. I'm not saying that they're going to be top 5 in pace and all that kind of stuff, but they will still be top 12 in pace and passing rate and all these types of things. And Brandon Cooks is going to be a huge beneficiary of it. And I don't usually go the way when I'm picking sleepers of picking like wide receivers that are near 30, over 30. But right now, everything screams to me that Brandon Cooks is being undervalued and forgotten about.
Yeah, I think forgotten about is the best way to put it. I mean, like last year, like right now, he's going outside the top 40 wide receivers.
Craziness.
And that horrendous season with the Texans, he finishes the wide receiver 49. I know finish is obviously a little bit different in points per game, but he only played 13 games. But the point is, he's going around where he finished last year. And now he has a new quarterback that's a lot better. He has a new offense that's a lot better. I mean, that offense in the Cowboys with Dak over the last 3 years actually led the NFL in points per drive. So touchdown upside could be coming. I mean, he has CeeDee Lamb to take away coverage. He's not going to be seeing the number 1 cornerback every week like he was always in Houston. Again, all signs are pointing up for Brandon Cooks, but another guy that I think has never gotten enough love and is not necessarily a fantasy darling, but has the potential to continue to progress to that is Jacoby Myers. And Jacoby Myers, now in the Raiders, going as the wide receiver 43 right now. The biggest thing that people keep talking about that I think is getting completely misunderstood is the whole Hunter Renfrow situation. People are acting like, okay, the Raiders have 2 slot wide receivers now. Like, what are they going to possibly do with both these guys? They gave Jacoby Myers a big deal, so what's going to happen? But I actually think that the Raiders are a smarter team than we think and are going to use Jacoby Myers on the outside. And here's why. Last year, among all NFL wide receivers, Jacoby Myers was 2nd in targets per route run from the perimeter. He was 6th in yards per route run from the perimeter, 19th in yards per route run overall. He commanded at least 20% of the targets in 70% of his games in 22. And he has now had 3 straight seasons where he was targeted on over 25% of his routes. He also just topped all Patriots wide receivers since Tom Brady left for the best wide receiver finish without Tom Brady in a season at wide receiver 27. I think that he has more untapped potential. Darren Waller is gone from this Raiders team. Hunter Renfrow did not show improvement last year and does not seem like he is going to be an elite target hog like we thought he maybe could have been at some point. So outside of Devontae Adams, I think the next guy up for them is going to be clearly Jacoby Myers. I think this passing offense is going to be a little bit better than we thought with Jimmy G. It's not going to be what it was with Derek Carr, but ultimately Jacoby Myers has done nothing but improve. He has shown that he has some really hidden talents at the outside wide receiver position, and I think that right now there's a lot better potential than where he's going right now, and he's not getting enough love. I think he's being drafted at his floor. I mean, do you think that Jimmy G can help elevate Jacoby Myers, or do you think that that's just going to take that offense down from what he had with Mac Jones?
Well, I'll push back on the fact that I think that the Raiders are a good organization. I think they're run by a bunch of idiots. I think Josh McDaniels is overrated, but this does not mean that I dislike Jacoby Myers. I've been screaming to the high heavens of, like, if you look at deeper metrics, his ability to draw targets, his yards per route run, his ability on the field, Jacoby Myers has been slept on for multiple years. And a lot of that comes with, like, just the New England Patriots wide receiver stink. So yeah, I love this call, man. I mean, there's multiple ways to look at this, Alex. Like, one, we saw flash weeks out of Mac freaking Hollins of all people in this offense last year. Derek Carr played terribly last year. If you look at every single metric from an efficiency standpoint, he struggled. Now, I don't think Jimmy Garoppolo is a floor and ceiling lifting quarterback, and that's not going to shock anybody out there. But what I do think is, for this system and what Josh McDaniels is going to ask out of the quarterback, I think you could see better quarterback play inside of this system. And if that happens, I'm not telling you that Jimmy G is the part that's going to help Jacoby raise up, but the fact of this offense being more efficient, running more smoothly with even, I mean, I'm not saying like top shelf quarterback play, but better than what Carr was doing last year, could help Jacoby Myers.
Yep, exactly. And the other thing to go back to is, I mean, Jacoby Myers the last 2 years, not an amazing, but he's finished the wide receiver 30 and the wide receiver 28, gets an upgrade at quarterback, an upgrade in offense. It's probably going to score more points. So I think that, again, all things are looking up for him, and I'm really excited. Let's get to the tight end position. So we have the tight end position. We each have our bonus number one sleeper in all of fantasy football that you need to be thinking about, and Derek's flag plant. But the tight end position is interesting. I mean, every year people, shoot their darts on who is going to be this year's late round tight end. Some people get it, some people don't. I think athleticism usually has a little bit of something to do with who is going to be the late round tight end for that year. But who is it for you this year? Because every year, like at the very beginning of the season, this is tough. People haven't figured out everything just yet. But what is the crystal ball telling you early about this year's late round tight end?
I think if people are going deep down the rabbit hole right now and they're going to ride with me on this one, they're expecting me to pull up Chigakonkwo on this one. I'm not. I like him, but that is not the name that I'm going with. The guy that I like, and again, I think that he is being forgotten because I think people are looking at his situation like nothing changed. Nothing changed at all. Jelani Woods, his entire situation did change. He's still in competition with Mo Alley Cox, Kyle Granderson. But the thing about it is, Frank Reich is gone. Now we have Shane Steichen and Jim Bob Cooter at the wheel, and both of these coaches have shown a propensity to not use the 3-4 tight end. Basically, like, okay, who do we have on the depth chart? All right, we're gonna play all of them. All of them. Come on, y'all all get some snaps today. No, this is not the Frank Reich system. Both of these coaches have shown the willingness to lean on one guy as being the guy. And for considering youth, athleticism, upside, I think that guy could be Jelani Woods. And if we're talking about, you pull up his athletic measurables and the guy is a mutant. Okay, so that obviously that's the first thing we have to discuss here. But also his deeper numbers have shown that he's on the field, he's catching passes. He's not run blocking. He could do that if you need him to do that. But last year, 58.1% of his snaps were either in the slot or out wide. He was 14th in yards per route run. He was 9th in yards per route run against man coverage. So why does that matter? A lot of your most elite wide receivers, the guys that can play inside, outside, be difference makers in fantasy, not only do they pop in yards per route run, but you look at other metrics against man coverage. And especially we're talking about Jelani Woods playing some on the outside. He does have the ability to do that. Jelani Woods could emerge as the number 2 option in this passing attack behind Michael Pittman. Paris Campbell's gone. Alec Pierce has not shown anything greater than what Jelani Woods showed last year in the ability to earn targets. Who else is catching the damn ball there, Alex? So, like, Jelani Woods, well, it seems like I'm just bringing up a guy to talk about a guy that's a tight end 2 and a sleeper or whatever. There is a lot to love about Jelani Woods, and people are pricing him and talking about him like nothing at all changed or could change going into his second season.
I love that. I think people forget that he is going to his second season. He's a little bit of a unicorn in terms of his size and speed profile. And again, if they can get a quarterback in draft, or even if they don't, I think that Gardner Minshew is a perfect complement to what they can do. And you saw his success with Dallas Goedert, when Jalen Hurts is out for a couple games last year, albeit a small sample size. But again, like you said, I think that it's going to be a different tight end rotation and should definitely benefit Jelani Woods. So I think is clearly the most talented tight end of this group. But for me,
easily.
I have to, once again, I'm sorry to the listener, I have to go back to the Broncos for my sleeper tight end. And I think that this guy is going to be this year's late round tight end. There is no question about it. I know we talked about him recently, but I cannot talk about him enough. And for me, it's Greg Dulcich. I mean, among the last 20 years in the NFL, there have been 3 rookie tight ends with a 15+% target share and an average depth target over 9 yards. Those tight ends are Vernon Davis, Kyle Pitts, and Evan Ingram. I mean, Greg Dulcich last year as a rookie had the 7th most targets among the tight end position. He had the 5th highest route percentage, which was the opposite of Jelani Woods, where for what the tight ends were running for routes, there's only 4 guys that were on the field at a higher rate than Greg Dulcich was last year, which is phenomenal for him. He was targeted on 19% of those routes, which is an elite number for any rookie, especially at the tight end position. And now you bring in what should be an improved offense that should score more points and should be more efficient overall. Tight ends in their rookie years generally don't do well, and he should only improve. So, and he's athletic. Like, there's just no, besides the fact that maybe you could look at, some of these Sean Payton offenses that didn't have Jimmy Graham and say, okay, maybe the tight end production wasn't the absolute greatest. Outside of that, I think that all signs are pointing towards Greg Dulcich. But Debra, let me ask you. I know you like Greg Dulcich in general, but what are the red flags, the reasons that he's going outside the top 10 right now when things are more looking up for him?
I mean, this all comes down to are people willing to buy into the third passing option for Russell Wilson?
Yeah.
People don't want to buy into Russell Wilson in general. So if you're not buying into Russell Wilson, how in the hell are you going to people don't even like the second option in the passing attack, Alex. So to see that the third option in the passing attack, people are like, yeah, leave him for dead. Don't want him at all. That's not surprising at all, man. This all comes back to the original point of recency bias and people hating Russell Wilson. And I'm not saying that, look, he's meme worthy and the jokes are still there. I'm not going to stop, quoting Mr. Unlimited. I'm not going to stop that, but that's not going to stop me from buying into an offense that honestly floor ceiling combo is not being priced into, where basically everybody in this offense outside of Jerry Jeudy is going in early best ball drafts and will probably, that's going to last into redraft. I can't see anybody just turning the tide and saying, yee, let's go Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson, big time, baby. So I love this call.
Would it be fair to call this Broncos team like the 2022 Seahawks, where they could be a surprising playoff team, where they have some weapons that people are overlooking because of the potential quarterback play? Again, I know Seahawks, Russell Wilson, fair comparison there. Who knows? But again, we can dream. I think that, like you said, we are probably just a year too early on the Broncos. I am definitely a believer this year, but we each have one player left to talk about, our bonus biggest sleeper of all. Debro, you are the guest. We will start with you. Who is your number 1 sleeper in all of fantasy football right now?
I know that people could be expecting me to bring up a wide receiver, a running back that, is going to start out the season with a starting job. Maybe he's going as a wide receiver 2, but he's a 1, a 3, but a 2, things of that nature. I want to bring up another guy, and much in the similar mold of Samaje Perine, that is going way too late. He's not being priced anywhere close to where he should be. And that's Jaylen Warren. I've talked about Jaylen Warren. I love Jaylen Warren as a prospect. It astounded me that Jaylen Warren went undrafted, but Steelers just got a fantastic, fantastic player that fell into their lap last year. And Jaylen Warren, in his rookie season, he showed us that he's got standalone value, Alex. Like weeks 5 through 18, he posted 6 weeks of RB3 or better production. He's been efficient. He's 16th in breakaway run rate last year, 5th in juke rate. He was top 20 in multiple different metrics, including the passing game. He showed last year in his rookie season, he's a better pass catcher than Najee Harris. You look at both PFF receiving grade, which Jaylen Warren was 4th amongst all running backs with 20 or more targets. Najee was 32nd. Yards per route run, Jaylen Warren was 18th. Najee was outside of that. He had 1.24 yards per route run. Najee couldn't even crest 1. So we're talking about Jaylen Warren could have a standalone role from week 1. could be the guy that when they go passing downs, Jaylen Warren could be on the field and not Najee Harris. And that's not insane to say. Mike Tomlin was effusive in his praise for Jaylen Warren the entire season last year. So to say that he could carve out a standalone role, and maybe Najee Harris is not a full-time bell cow, much less if Najee Harris goes down, there is not a running back on this damn depth chart, Alex, that will mess with Jaylen Warren for touches, for snaps at all. So we're talking about he's got standalone value. He's got upside that is there. If anything happens to Najee Harris, he's a possible freaking league winner. And yet, he's being drafted as a damn RB5 in most different spots. Like on Underdog, you could get him in the RB50 range, like in the 180s. And to me, that is absolutely asinine considering what we saw from last year. Even if you take this Steelers offense, the offensive line doesn't improve. Najee Harris just goes back to wasn't a full-time bell cow workload. Kenny Pickett does not take a step forward, which we could have brought Kenny Pickett up on this episode. I have not been a massive believer in Kenny Pickett, but when I looked at his stats down the stretch run, his efficiency numbers were damn good. And I'm not like just talking about, oh, well, it's passable. He was top 5 in multiple different spots over the last 5 to 6 games of the season. So this offense takes a step forward. They score more touchdowns, even if Najee Harris is involved. Jaylen Warren is going to offer you value where he's going and a massive ceiling if anything were to happen to Najee Harris.
Yep, I think that he could be arguably the number 1 handcuff in fantasy football this year. Probably not number 1, but maybe two or three for
really
sure.
Damn close.
Yeah,
top 3.
Absolutely. Completely agree. For me, it's someone that I just like the more I look at him, I shouldn't like him. And this would probably be a player that I would overlook in years past and make the mistake. But this year, I feel like all things are pointing up for Nico Collins, going as the wide receiver 51 right now. Last year, he was one of 9 players with over a 40% end zone target share. All of those other players that finished at that have a top 15 fantasy finish at some point in his career. He also went from a 16% target per route run to a 23% last year. In his career, he's had a 25% targets per route run without Brandon Cooks on the field compared to 18% with him. He also made a big jump in target share from 13% to 20% in year 2. All you're seeing is just these big jumps without Brandon Cooks from year 1 to year 2. And also last year, like he was going like in points per game, he was at the wide receiver 52, which is like lower than where he's going right now. And now there's no Brandon Cooks. The only other offensive weapons on this team right now for pass catchers are Robert Woods, Noah Brown, John Mechie, and Dalton Schultz. And now this Texans team has the number 2 pick where they're going to get probably, hopefully, a quarterback that can finally lead this team out of the absolute depths of the AFC South division. It might not happen this year, but point being, like, you can get a wide receiver outside the top 50 that improved across the board from year 1 to year 2, is going to get a quarterback upgrade, and is now going to be the number 1 wide receiver on his team. Try finding another wide receiver that checks all those boxes outside the top 50. Again, like I know that it's not the sexiest pick, like we talked about with the Texans earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I know the coaching staff left a really bad taste in people's mouth, but right now he is literally going where he finished after making gigantic improvements off the board. And why wouldn't he continue to do the same thing in year 3?
I mean, really, we're just talking about, even if you just wanted to sum this up and saying he's going to get better quarterback play.
Yep.
So you're drafting him like he doesn't take a step forward and nothing is different in this offense. Okay,
Exactly.
Fine. But nothing else is being baked into him walking into this season. So I like the call, Alex. I really do.
I love that. But we also have one final call to talk about today. My favorite question of all, as always, your 2023 flag plant, the boldest prediction that you believe in, the final big thing of the show today. So without further ado, D-Bro, the floor is all yours. What is your 2023 flag plant?
Okay, so, and fair to tell everybody, before we did this show, I threw you a few different options. I'm like, I just throw out takes. Some people think that I'm insane, I'm a madman, and I just like the hot take shit, but I really don't. I just follow the process. And so I was like, all right, Alex, pick out of this rabbit's hat of like, you know, what you like. What seems to be bold, what's not bold. I mean, come on, let's talk about some guys. And the one we gravitated to was Calvin Ridley is the discount version of Stephon Diggs. And I think Calvin Ridley is going to post monster numbers. Now, is Calvin Ridley a guy that you're going to say, okay, well, he's not going in the 8th round, the 9th round, whatever. Like, so how bold are you going to get with this? You're drafting this guy right now. Currently, if you head over to FFPC and you're doing the Fantasy Pros Championship, which has a milli up top, a lot of quiche. I'm interested in myself. With Calvin Ridley is being drafted as the wide receiver 21, Alex, off the board. And people could say, okay, well, yeah, but he's going in the 4th round, man. Like, and that's not even every draft. Like, his ADP right now is sitting at, let me find him again, 4.9. He goes as late as the late 5th round. That is a 4 to 5 round difference off of where Stephon Diggs goes routinely. And people say, yeah, but he's been out of football for a year. Do you think after a year off of football that Calvin really just forgot how to play football? I'm sorry. Let's say that aloud. After 1 year off of football, which Calvin Ridley obviously looks like he's motivated if he's been working out, we think maybe he forgot how to play football? I heard the same things about Jamar Chase. Much different player, very different situation, but apparently Jamar Chase, after a year off of football, forgot how to catch footballs. I understand Calvin Ridley, and a lot of people say, oh, he's a year off of football. We used to talk about Calvin Ridley when he came out and say, oh, he's an older prospect. He's this, he's that. Everybody talks about Calvin Ridley without saying, okay, he's 28. It's the same age as Stephon Diggs and a multiple elite wide receivers that are still putting up wide receiver 1 numbers. So if you're talking about, okay, well, maybe he's over the hill. No, he's not. He's not nearly as old as people talk about or think, or at least in the context of, oh, well, just out of mind, out of sight. The other thing about it is they'll point to, okay, well, the last time we saw him, he wasn't very good. He wasn't very good, not because of Calvin Ridley. That is because Matt Ryan, at the time, we were like, okay, he's getting older, but I don't think he's fully washed. Then he goes to Indy, and we're like, oh, shit, no, he's totally washed. Like, he needs to stop playing football. He can't throw it 10 yards down the freaking field. If you go back to the last time we saw Calvin Ridley play football, Alex, there was nothing wrong with that man in the sense of he was still getting open at an elite clip. He was 5th in route win rate. He was 3rd in win rate against man coverage. You throw out all the other peripherals because quarterback play, and especially as bad as Matt Ryan was playing over the last 2 years as a starter, can drag down a lot of your efficiency numbers. To say that, okay, yes, a lot of like good wide receivers overcome that. It doesn't always happen. Sometimes the quarterbacks are just playing that damn bad that they pull everybody down with them. And that can absolutely happen because you look deeper, Calvin Ridley showing us that he could still play. He was playing well. And then if you turn the table to what could this Jacksonville Jaguars offense look like in 2023, we saw down the back half of the season, Trevor Lawrence was playing arguably as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Every single metric you would look at would point you in that direction that he was a top 5 quarterback as far as production and play on the field down the back half of the season, as well as after week 9, Jacksonville was 11th in neutral pace, 10th in neutral passing rate, which was double what they were the first few weeks of the season. Weeks 1 through 8, they were 18th in neutral passing rate. So basically, Doug Peterson said, well, you're playing really freaking good. Let's put the ball in your hands more. Let's throw the ball more. And now we have Calvin Ridley, who is an unquestioned number 1 wide receiver, walking into this offense surrounded by Zay Jones, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, Travis Etienne. And we don't think that Calvin Ridley has the upside to be a top 5, top 7 wide receiver. Put him up in that type of Stephon Diggs tier where he could catch close to 100 balls, finished with 1,500 receiving yards. And even though, yes, he's being drafted as a top 25, top 24 wide receiver, the value is absolutely there for him to smash.
You heard it here first. A top 5 or top 7 wide receiver. When I ask for a bold prediction, that is the exact type of thing that I'm looking for a flag plant. For me, I really like Calvin Ridley. Am I that bullish on him like you are? Probably not. But I love the value that he's going right now. And I think that he's someone that when we talk about, like for me, like on this podcast, we always talk about chase upside, chase upside, chase upside. Yeah. And when you look where he's going in drafts right now versus the upside, if you compare the other players in that ADP range, there really aren't many players with a higher ceiling than Calvin Ridley. Is he can hit it? Who knows? But fantasy football, you're not playing for second. You are playing for first. Calvin Ridley, one of those players that will help you get first. Before we get out of here, D-Bro, I appreciate you coming on. You've been a phenomenal guest, as always. What else would the people expect? But where can the people find you, your amazing work, and all the different things that you're putting out on daily?
Thanks, Alex, man. This is always a fun treat to get to chop it up with you, man. So thank you for asking me. Look, my door is always open, man. I love talking ball with you. So anytime you need somebody, just holler at me, man. But this is a ton of fun. Right now, I'm still in the rookie weeds, as it were. I'm updating all of my rookie primers, which are live on FantasyPros.com right now. Our Dynasty Draft Kit and Best Ball Draft Kits are both live. I have stuff looking at Best Ball ADP risers. Basically, guys, if you want to chase closing line value, this is why we draft Best Ball early. So you need to get in on those guys, Samaje Perine, a few other quarterbacks. And I go through every single position about who I think you need to get right now in your drafts, because the ADPs, you're never going to see these ADPs for the rest of the year. That's pretty much it, man. It's Dynasty. I'm on the main show. We have a mock draft that should have just dropped today, and all things NFL draft, dude. So, I mean, it's this right now in fantasy football, it's 365 24/7, dude. We got so many things to talk about, so many people that DGens and all can wet their beak on. It's a good time to be alive, Alex.
Oh, it is always a great time to be alive, especially when you're on the show. We really appreciate you coming on. But as always, he is Derek Brown. I am Alex Caruso, and this is the Fresh Fantasy Podcast. New episodes coming out every single Tuesday and Friday. Don't forget to tune in. But until next time, don't forget to keep chasing that upside.